Which clip? The one with the dildos or the second one?
First one.
Okay. Well,
we're going to play them both. All right, everyone, warm up those brains. It's time for the Get More Smarter podcast. This is episode 235. I'm Jason Bain.
I'm Ian Silveri. This week in the Get More Smarter podcast, that constitutional crisis we keep talking about keeps getting worse. At what point do the people who can maybe do something about it start doing something about it, especially as Trump's poll numbers continue to nosedive? Then, are we headed for a Trump-session, a Trump-pression, or another worse third thing caused by the worst president the country has ever had? Only time will tell. Then, we check in on Colorado's representatives in two capitals as the Colorado legislative session enters the home stretch and Republicans in Congress are doing whatever the hell it is they're doing. But first, she's a Colorado state representative for the Get More Smarter podcast and a freshman in the Colorado House of Representatives. State Rep Rebekah Stewart joins us to talk about what it was like in her first year of her first term in the lower chamber of the Colorado legislature. Take a listen. It is now my unbelievably great pleasure to introduce our guest this week, Rebekah Stewart of Colorado's House District 30, officially state representative of the pod. Representative Stewart, welcome to the Get More Smarter podcast.
Hey, thanks. Great to be here.
And we determined that you are actually both of our state representatives. Yep. So you are the official state rep of the pod, even though we somehow, for some reason, have two different state senators.
I have
and we have a lot to complain about.
Doors.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You have knocked on my parents' door also. They showed me your literature and they were very happy to have gotten the visit. So we'll start off with a question that we're trying to remember to ask all of our guests and so far have not really been successful at that, but it's pretty simple. Why are you a Democrat?
Wow, what a cool question. No one's ever asked me that before.
We've meant to do this to compile like a bunch of clips of all our guests explaining this, and we just now remembered. So
congratulations, you're the guinea pig. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, I have an interesting journey to being a Democrat because I actually grew up in a very conservative home with parents who are still to this day Republicans. And so my journey, I think, of just being out in the world by myself and discovering that and journeying through early adulthood really changed so much of my worldview and my perspective and my political affiliation as well. So, I am a Democrat actively by choice, not because I grew up one. And I think it's because I care very deeply about ensuring that we as a society are working to support and uplift the most vulnerable in our communities. And because I care about everybody being treated equally. That sounds really basic, but having lived in both sides of this and seeing the way that people are treated and talked about, and having been a therapist myself and working in the disability community, I just see actively every day how programs like Medicaid make a huge difference in the lives of the exact people that we are supposed to be supporting and uplifting and protecting. That's a long-winded answer, and there's probably more, but there you go.
Well, it's very similar to my answer, except for the therapist part.
We couldn't possibly have two board-certified music therapists on the podcast at once. The world is not big enough to contain.
No.
Quite that many of us even.
So before you were elected to the State House, you served on the Lakewood City Council and did work as a board-certified music therapist. What surprised you the most about your transition from the City Council to the State Capitol?
Ooh, in the first couple of weeks, somebody asked me this, and I said, it's like being in a city council meeting, but you're there for 8 hours every day.
So how long is a normal city council meeting?
When I first started, a normal city council meeting was 2 to 3 hours, and now I feel like they've gotten a slightly longer winded recently. So 3 hours is a short city council meeting now. And that whole time you're actively reading and amending and voting and listening. And it was all of a sudden doing that. But you didn't have an entire week to prepare for a 3-hour meeting. You had
Mhm.
24 hours to prepare for an 8-hour meeting. And that's kind of what it felt like right at the beginning. I'm getting the hang of it now, but and also the amount of people who want to talk to you all the time is wild.
Not a lot, not like a huge lobby in the Lakewood City Council. Is that what you're saying?
No, my gosh, I hardly ever got lobbied except by actual constituents on the
Right.
city council. It's very, very different. Yeah.
So your background, as you mentioned, is in music therapy, and we have to admit we didn't know there was even a music therapy board. So as the first board certified music therapist, certainly on the podcast, but also elected to office in Colorado, as we understand, has that background come in handy at all in the Capitol?
Yeah, I think it has. Less because of specifically the field that I was in, and more just because I come from a helping profession. And for well over 10 years in Colorado, I was a Medicaid provider and worked in hospitals and worked in outpatient rehab and community services. And all of that experience I'm so grateful for because it's given me a really well-rounded perspective on, especially when we have conversations around healthcare. I just have a lot of personal experience as a provider, and that has definitely informed some of the bills that I've run this session. I also think just being a therapist in this building is a value add because there are so many different personalities inside of the chamber and outside of the chamber. And especially right now, we're in the last 12 days of session and people are tired and tempers are flaring and things are getting exponentially more difficult, I would say. And being able to kind of keep a perspective of understanding all of those things and actively treating people with grace and understanding as we navigate these last 2 weeks, I think is a value add.
I was going to ask you a joke or a question about like what it's like to, can you lull Scott Bottoms to sleep by singing to him or something? But more interesting than that, there's sort of two layers to this conversation because if I followed the budget correctly, and I'm not sure I did, there was no provider rate increase at the end of the day, was there, in the state budget?
There actually was, which
Okay, tell us a
was
little bit about that.
a miracle, and I'm so grateful.
Because the
If you
governor's budget did not have one. That's maybe where I got
That
stuck.
is
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
Enough of us were not happy about that is not the budget that we voted through. Fortunately, we were only able to give Medicaid providers about a 1.6% provider rate increase across the board. And as we all know, the cost of living is probably going to be more than 1.6%. So functionally, and I felt this for 10 years in a row, we would get a 1 to 2% provider rate increase, but the cost of living was going up 3% conservatively. Some years it was going up 5%. And so functionally, you actually are getting a rate cut. And that is a huge part of why providers like myself, quite frankly, are not actively serving in the field right now because it's too expensive to live in Colorado. And even with the statement that we made by making bigger cuts in other places so that we can make sure to fully fund education and Medicaid and give providers a much deserved and needed rate increase, it's still, I all understand it's not enough. So yes and no, I guess.
We talk a lot on this show about the $880 billion cut that's coming to Medicaid, 90 something percent of it, most likely coming from that pot of money, and how devastating that's going to be. But we don't often get the chance to talk to people who work with people impacted in the community. Can you tell us assuming that goes through and it is as devastating as we assume it will be, what does that mean for people?
I'm really scared, to be honest with you, about that. That is so impactful. We're already in Colorado. We were looking at a $1.2 billion decrease in the budget this year, which frankly was managed really expertly. Again, in that it is a miracle that we were able to not make any cuts to Medicaid, give a provider rate increase, and not make any cuts to education funding this year. But that is potentially not even going to be the case next year. And that is with a stable federal environment. And that's already really scary and really concerning, and why we need to talk about Tabor. But given that the realities of that in Colorado, thinking about losing, quite frankly, any federal funding to Medicaid is going to mean real cuts to services on the ground for people. It could mean things like rolling back the Obamacare Medicaid expansion for middle income folks. It could mean cutting services for people with spinal cord injuries and developmental disabilities and early childhood, early intervention services for kids with autism. Like all of those things in an environment where we see decreases in federal funding like that, Colorado can't make that up. Like there's absolutely no way we can make that up. So it's going to mean real cuts for people in Colorado, and it really scares me.
So it sounds like you don't buy the narrative that it's just all waste, fraud, and abuse, and we can just, get rid of all the grift and graft in the system, and the people who are actually being aided in this program, who I guess, quote unquote, deserve it or need it, will be held harmless. It sounds like you don't buy that.
I don't buy that at all.
When you think about the people that you've worked with who rely on Medicaid, if that were to go away, what do you suppose they would do?
I mean, in Colorado, for an adult with a developmental disability, there are a few different options of additional services beyond just basic health coverage, and these are called waivers. And there are different waivers depending on your level of need, but these waivers cover things like housing. So,
Right.
I mean, it's people being housed, adults with IDD who may not have any parents or guardians who are living anymore, who are being housed in a host home, and another family is opening up their home and taking care of them. That's what Medicaid pays for some of these people. This isn't just doctor's visits. This is real, essential, basic needs of people who need a little bit extra in life.
Wow. Well, let's switch a little bit over back to the legislature. Now that you've nearly completed your first session, and as someone who I know spent time at the legislature or, around the Capitol, so I'm sure you had some ideas about what the job might be like. What were some of the biggest misconceptions you think that you had coming in that turned out to be different?
Well, I think there were a couple of bills that I came in thinking, oh, this one will be easy. Famous last words.
Right.
I think I knew how busy I would be. I think it was more just adjusting to a new schedule and figuring out kind of how to navigate dynamics within and outside of our caucus. And, I've also really been pleasantly surprised at how many Republicans I worked really well with this session too.
Along those lines, in professional sports, particularly in the NBA, rookies talk about hitting the wall, which is like when in college, they play 30 games. In the NBA, they play 82. And there's a point where they're like, oh, man, this is exhausting. Did you hit a wall this year?
Yeah, I think it was maybe about halfway through the session. It was right when committee work was the most intense because we were trying to get all of the bills through committee by the halfway point of session so that we could send them over to the Senate. And I serve on the Finance Committee, which is the committee I've learned this year that gets all of the tough bills and has to take really hard votes. It's a little bit of a trial by fire for a freshman. And there were a couple of bills that were pretty difficult, and definitely a week in there where I thought, I'm not totally sure why I signed up for this.
Can you tell us about one of those tough votes? Like, was it just because it was a good thing you wanted to do and there wasn't money for it? Or
No, I think probably one of the toughest conversations and votes that we have had this session was because there was disagreement within the Democratic caucus and ecosystem, if you will, around an adjustment to the tipped minimum wage statute for tipped
Yeah.
workers in Colorado, and that bill came through finance, and that bill was the culprit for the hardest week that I have ever had.
This is one of those like lose-lose situations, right? Because you had
Yeah.
these restaurants and these small businesses that were
Hmm.
just, they could not make it pencil out. No
Yeah.
one's going to spend $30 on a burger. But, the cost of living, like you said, in Colorado and in Denver specifically, is
Hmm.
just going through the roof. So
And we
nobody
can't
wanted to.
cut workers' wages. Yeah.
Right. So
Hmm.
what ended up happening with that bill? We actually haven't covered that too much on the show.
I actually think, and having been a person who came from local government, I think gave me a really unique and helpful perspective in this, I hope. And being one of the representatives who actually represents one of the three municipalities in the entire state who has actively changed their local minimum
Right.
wage, I think is one of the reasons why I felt the weight of this decision so deeply, because it was actively going to affect people in my district. So the one of the rubs was that local governments actually, though they have the ability to tinker with their own minimum wages now in Colorado, they were not given the ability to adjust their tip credit in state statute when that a bill was passed. And so the compromise that ended up being
The tip
struck,
credit is essentially how much a tip counts toward that overall minimum wage, correct?
correct. Yeah. Yeah. And a person has to make that amount in tips. Otherwise, the employer does have to make up that pay all the way up to minimum wage. So no one's ever going to be making less than minimum wage. They're never going to be bringing that home. But the compromise that was struck was to freeze the minimum tip credit at 302 like it is at the state. So to mirror that with the state, but to allow local governments who do choose to increase their minimum wage to increase their tip credit if they want to, but they don't have to. They just can't shrink it beyond
Right. Got
the
it.
state minimum wage. So that was the actively when the bill passed. Nothing is going to change, frankly, for anybody, but we're giving local governments a little bit more control to make those determinations for their own communities and what is best for their own communities instead of the state stepping in and saying, here's what we think you should do. And that felt, as a local government person, like a good compromise.
As you mentioned, there was about $1.2 billion in cuts that had to happen this session. And I look at the budget a little more cynically, having spent my fair share of time in the Capitol. I think it's kind of a house of cards. And you mentioned Tabor before, and I would say that's the reason why.
Mhm.
But we had a great interview with chair of the powerful Joint Budget Committee, Senator Jeff Bridges, on the show a couple weeks ago before the budget passed. And now that it's all the way through the process, I'm curious if, because in an environment like that, what we used to do, and I think what you all had to do, is essentially any bill that spends money is basically dead on arrival.
Mhm.
You have to make a lot of other policies, but if you're spending money, you have to go elsewhere, or wait for a few years. Did that affect any of your priorities? The fact that you came into the legislature with some big ideas you wanted to pursue, and then there was no money to do anything with them?
Yeah, it did, but it was also actually, if I'm being totally honest with you, the policy nerd in me found that it was kind of a fun challenge because there is so much good that we can do and so many things that need to be addressed that don't cost any money. And so I found it kind of a fun challenge. There are a couple of things that, I'm not running this year, and we'll see how long it takes for us to be able to have the money to do some of these things, but there was no lack of ideas still. So
Yeah, it's funny. You guys make like 400 to 500 laws a year, and then next year there's 400 and 500 more. It's
it's
pretty
wild.
remarkable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of shocking.
Tell us about the bills that you sponsored, that you came up with. How did they go, and what do you expect next?
They've gone really well so far. I think I want to say that I've had 4 bills signed into law
Hey,
already.
congrats.
And 2 more are sitting on the governor's desk waiting for his signature. So I'm really excited about that. I think one bill that I'm really proud of because it expanded services to kids with long-term healthcare needs and disabilities, and it didn't cost anything, but 2,500 more kids on Medicaid are going to get access to additional really incredible services like music therapy. And in a year like this, where we're just cutting, to be able to expand services in a way that actually didn't cost any money was pretty incredible. And I'm pretty proud of that, given my background. But one bill I'm really proud of, because it was an idea that came from my experience on city council and our community in Lakewood, was my bill around tap fees and conservation oriented tap fees that I actually got to run with Senator Bridges. He and I have actually run quite a few bills together this year, which is pretty fun.
Not a bad idea to cozy up to the chair of the JBC. Good on you.
Not at all.
What was that? The first bill that the governor signed that you sponsored. What was that?
The House Bill 1003, the Children with Complex Health Needs waiver.
What was it like standing there watching him sign your bill into law?
It's such a, in the moment when you're standing there in that room, you're just there with a whole bunch of people you know already, and it's just a signature on a piece of paper. So it's so ordinary. And then at the exact same time, just if you sit there and think about it for a second, that you just made a law that is going to make 2,500 kids' lives better, is just kind of overwhelming and still brings me to tears a little bit. It's very humbling to be a part of just one little piece of history in Colorado. That is overwhelming to me. I hope that I never lose that feeling. That's pretty incredible.
You won't lose the feeling, but you will like open like the drawer in your kitchen and see like 6 or 7 bill signing pens, and then you like sift through them to find the tape to like wrap up the present. That happens to us a lot. Brittany was sort of a prolific lawmaker, as you clearly are going to be as well. And on that note, we talked about how many laws get made every year. I'm always curious how legislators balance trying to form their own opinions of bills. I mean, like reading bill text is like relatively inscrutable. You have to like grab your statute book or put it in context or whatever. And then you just have like tons of constituents or lobbyists or interest groups coming to like tell you it's actually this way or it's that way and you should vote yes or vote no. What's your process for making up your mind on like how you're actually going to vote on something either in committee or on the floor?
That's a really good question. There are certain lawmakers who I know I align with on certain issues like housing policy. There, I have already identified some of the people who run bills that I wish I would have thought of myself. So that's always helpful. It's a helpful starting place. Reading through the bill, I just like to have a pen out and ask questions. Then at least when I'm having conversations with the bill sponsors or with other lawmakers or with lobbyists, I know what questions to ask, and I feel like I have a good handle on the policy already. And I also have some good friends in the legislature already who I know are experts in certain areas who I will go to with questions and to kind of test the waters on how they're feeling about certain pieces of legislation to level set, where I am on some of those. So it depends on the bill, depends on the topic. You can't be an expert in everything. So
Right.
I feel absolutely no shame or hesitation in leaning on people who I know more than me on certain issues.
One of the things we've talked about on this show before, and we normally do this at the beginning and the end of every legislative session, so we're curious if you have any in mind. We call these bills like sneaky genius bills, like something that like kind of looks like on the surface like it's not a big deal, but the impact or the effect of it is like kind of brilliant or novel or new. Were there anything that like fits that description that you encountered this year?
Yes, but of course you've caught me totally off guard, and I can't think of one. I mean, I think I ran a sneaky genius bill this year.
Is this the 2,500 kids with disabilities, or a different one?
No, it's the expansion of the definition of a growth cap bill.
Talk about that.
Well, a couple of years ago, Representative Linstead ran a bill that put the definition of what a growth cap was into statute so that municipalities could not institute growth caps because we're in a housing crisis in Colorado. Now, we were seeing that Many communities were finding ways to get around that because it was a pretty narrow definition, and I wanted to expand it. And what we ended up doing was running a one-page bill that basically added a sentence to the statute that has now frozen the potential housing density of every urban census tract city in the state at the density that they can no longer ever go under.
That is sneaky genius. That counts. Yeah. And this
Yeah.
is partially, if I'm not mistaken, due to like Lakewood's insane growth cap that was passed on the ballot by people who some of us have defeated in elections in the past. That was extremely harmful. In fact, I wrote a Denver Post column about this when I used to do that, and I could not believe it was like you could not build more than 300 units of housing per year in Lakewood. And so what Rep. Linstead did, and then what you expanded on, basically said, we're not going to do that stuff anymore. That's great.
Yeah. And cities can't blanket down zone anymore. So whatever the potential zone density of a city is right now in Colorado is the floor forever.
That's great. That's great. That's sneaky genius.
Absolutely. Well, now that you've got almost an entire session under your belt, do you think you're going to approach the 2026 session differently?
Yes,
In what way?
definitely. I think I've learned not to commit to a vote on a bill too early before you have all the information. I've already learned that lesson, but it will be a helpful lesson to have at the beginning of next section. And I'm also really looking forward to the opportunity of using the entire summer and interim to craft legislation instead of literally writing 3 bills in 3 weeks, which I think is cuckoo bananas. So I'm excited about that.
All right. So now that you will have some time to plan and plot and scheme and meet with people, but do you have any ideas for what you might run next session at the top of your list?
Yes, I would love to run a music therapy licensure bill.
Conflict
That
of
is-
interest. Sorry, can't have it.
I actually did check because I'm not making any money as a music therapist right now. It's okay.
Very good.
But I did check. And then one idea that I'm really excited about that I'm working on with a couple of other representatives right now is around the cost of healthcare for our teachers and our educators, and looking at some ways that we can potentially give districts more bargaining power with healthcare plans to reduce costs, or looking into a couple of other solutions to try and reduce healthcare costs, especially for covered family members, for educators. That's really where the cost starts to balloon. I have friends who are paying, I'm not kidding when I say over $1,000 a month to cover a spouse and a child.
Jeez.
And especially in a budget environment like this, where we already are not paying teachers what they deserve, being able to put that money back in their pockets is a game changer. And so we're looking at some solutions for that. And I'm very excited about that because that will be life-changing and impactful for so many
absolutely.
people.
Before you get too overly jaded after you've been in the legislature for a long time, while you're still kind of new to the process, is there something you would change about how the legislature operates that you think would just improve the process overall?
I mean, we talked about just the sheer volume of bills that we pass every year. And I mean, I am guilty of running more than my 5 bill allotment. However, I do think that sometimes we try to rush things through, and it ends up being messy legislation because we do that. And it feels really urgent in the moment. And so, there are a lot of things that are really urgent. And at the same time, I feel like nothing is so urgent that it's worth passing bad legislation that we have to go back and fix. I think that it's not a great mindset to get into. And so I wish that we didn't always have such a deep sense of Well, it's introduced and we have the bill title this year, so we just have to pass something if it's just not working.
Right. That's a really good answer. Before we let you go, where can folks find you? Are you on Instagram, the website that used to be called Twitter, Blue Sky? Like, where can folks find you online if they want to follow along?
I am on Instagram and Facebook. I am also on Threads, but I will just say that everything gets cross-posted, so it doesn't matter which one you're on.
Very good. Find Rebekah anywhere on the internet, and it is the same Rebekah you will find anywhere else on the internet. Website, if folks want to check out what you're working on?
Yeah, it's RebekahForColorado.com, and my name is spelled differently. It's Rebekah.
Very good. Well, State Representative Rebekah Stewart, freshman from House District 30, official state representative of the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on the Get More Smarter podcast. This was really, really fun. You're great.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Man, we're being well served in the state capitol.
Absolutely. It's exciting to when you've got younger people entering politics who really get what they're doing also.
And it's like we had this whole generation, and like Brittany is guilty of this, I'm guilty of this, of just like political operatives who like got elected. And now you're starting to see like that sort of Obama era like activist operative class like make way for this more people with real life experience and real jobs. And you can just see like how intelligent and passionate she was about Medicaid and providers and helping people with disabilities. Those are the kinds of folks that like really should be getting in there now that Colorado has like stopped being this competitive electoral machine and instead is like a reliably blue state. You don't need so many political operatives. You can actually put some more like real people in there, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a bit about President Trump. The constitutional crisis is here.
Did we talk about how we started recording these on Fridays now because of Trump?
No, I don't think we mentioned
told
it.
the audience that.
Yeah. We used to record on Thursday mornings. We moved it to Fridays, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, because the Trump administration was dropping so much surprise crap on Fridays that we were missing it. So
by the time we got the podcast out, we had missed like incredibly major news developments. So we figured we'd just take one more day, and that has proven, unfortunately, to be a wise choice.
Yeah, it has. And the new thing today is that the constitutional crisis that we've been talking about may actually be different and worse than what we thought before.
But it is undeniably upon us.
It is here. So what's the latest?
So today, the Washington Post, CNN, and basically every other news outlet in the country is reporting on an escalation in said constitutional crisis being prosecuted by the Trump administration as Milwaukee County Circuit Judge Hannah Dugan has been arrested and charged with allegedly interfering with immigration enforcement.
Jesus.
From the Washington Post article, they're arresting judges now, Jason. From the article, federal prosecutors have charged a Milwaukee judge with obstructing an immigration arrest operation, the first known instance of the Justice Department pursuing a criminal case against a local official for allegedly interfering with immigration enforcement since President Trump returned to office. FBI Director Kash Patel, which are words I cannot fucking believe are not from an Onion article, announced the arrest of Milwaukee County Circuit Judge Hannah Dugan in a post on the social media platform that used to be called Twitter, which he deleted moments after posting. Patel accused Dugan of intentionally misdirecting federal agents who arrived at the courthouse to detain an immigrant who was set to appear before her in an unrelated proceeding. Quote, "Thankfully, our agents chased down the perp on foot, and he's been in custody since this guy really thinks he's in fucking CSI or something."
Yeah, he does.
Patel wrote on Twitter, but the judge's obstruction created increased danger to the public, he continued.
Yeah,
So,
anybody who uses perp in a regular sentence is not
fucking
a real law
cosplay.
enforcement person.
Right, exactly. So do we think this is really about this one case, or is the Trump regime taking another step toward authoritarianism? Arresting a judge really seems like an escalation in this constitutional crisis, yeah?
And it's very vague. The whole idea that, quote, she was intentionally misdirecting, unquote, federal agents. I don't know what that means. Like,
Look over there.
Yeah, he's down there. He went that way. Just kidding. He went that way. Like, but I don't know what she did. And if this is not some sort of real egregious thing that she did, then Yeah, we're on the way to other people being arrested. Mayors, local lawmakers, governors, who knows?
Yeah, this is the question. It's like, how scary is this, and how far does it go? And you have to wonder, we're only 3 months in. I mean, it's still
We're
pretty
not even
early.
at his 100th day.
Right, and they're already arresting judges who are allegedly obstructing their agenda. Like, that is just a whole nother level, because this is this is a circuit court judge, right? This is somebody who's on the Milwaukee circuit, and like, I just think that it's a county circuit judge. So this is a totally different
Right.
level of government. This is not anything the federal government even has jurisdiction over, and yet here we are. So yeah, I agree with you. It's worrisome for mayors. Think about Mike Johnson. Think about the mayor of Chicago. Think about the mayor of New York, who have been, well, I guess not him because he's in Trump land now, but who have been dragged in front of Congress to try and answer for how dare they try and do nice things for people who ended up in this country illegally, whether it was through their own fault or not. I don't know, man. It really feels like we have taken one more step, or maybe like there's a doomsday clock that has ticked one more minute toward midnight.
The one thing I hope maybe will happen from this is that maybe judges on every level, including the Supreme Court, will say, holy shit, like, let's actually insist on some of these rulings we've been making recently, pushing back on the Trump administration. Like,
this is one of those tough things. I mean, the courts don't have a police force. They don't have a military. You're just supposed to listen to them when they rule against you. And yet here we are. I mean, I guess the good news about this, if there is any good news about this, is that not as a direct result of this, of course, but it certainly can't be helping. Donald Trump's approval numbers are starting to absolutely crater.
Yeah, as the Washington Post reports, as we mentioned, next week will mark Trump's 100th day in office. And from this story in the Washington Post, it says, quote, a man who came into office vastly exaggerating the mandate the voters had just given him and has governed accordingly appears to have, per public polling, squandered whatever mandate he was given with his brazen actions. Multiple polls this week showed Trump hitting new lows. His approval rating has been double digits underwater in surveys from the Pew Research Center, minus 19.
And that's
Economist
the gap
YouGov,
between the approval and the disapproval. So 19 points. That's fucking gigantic.
Yes. Economist YouGov at minus 13. Reuters Ipsos minus 11. Fox News at minus 11. Trump was already more unpopular at this point in his presidency than any other president in history, not also named Trump. This is I'm surprised at how quickly people have caught on to the fact that he's just wrecking everything.
Couple of bad options in front of us, right? So like option A is he doesn't believe this and thinks what he's doing is popular and all these polls are fake, and therefore he's just going to go full steam ahead and keep executing the agenda. That's very scary for obvious reasons. Second possibility is that he knows they're real and doesn't care, which is almost scarier because then he's totally unchecked and unbridled. I do think, however, that it is most likely this third option, which is that he's surprised by the blowback he is receiving. He knows that there's a huge amount of resistance to what he's doing, and that means he might actually start to calibrate some of his actions and stop going so far, so fast on the least popular stuff.
Well, I think it's notable to your point that maybe option 3 and option 1, because Trump is just pretending none of this is happening. Here he is in the Oval Office recently.
If you look at what happened, everyone said, oh, I said I was going to get prices down. I did. Energy just hit $1.98 in a couple of states. It's way down. Energy's down, and we're about $64 a barrel. When I came in, and we were looking at $89, $90, $95. And by the way, that helps us solve the war, too. Having those energy prices is a big incentive for Russia to also agree with solving the war problem. Groceries are down. When I was with you 2 months ago, you were complaining about eggs. I said, I just got here. I was here for about a week when the press started saying about eggs have gone through the roof. I said, I just got here. Tell me about eggs. And they happened. They went through the roof and you couldn't get them. So we just had a big Easter egg hunt at the White House, thousands and thousands of eggs, and the price was down 87%. So we did a great job. If you look at what
no, none of that is true.
Can I show you something?
Yeah.
So there's this website called Data Assembly that keeps track of such things, and everything is up.
Grocery
Up,
prices
up.
are up 36 points. Holy crap.
Yeah.
I don't know what the points mean, but they're
Well,
up.
this is from October 6, 2019. So let's do the last 3 months. They're still up. It's not up as much as it was over 2019, but yep, things are going up, up, up. And of course they fluctuate. Of course they go up and down, but man alive, this is not, and this is one of the things you cannot just lie your way through. I went to go
People buy
grab
that stuff, man.
stuff to make for dinner last night. One thing of chicken breasts, a couple cloves of garlic, a half a gallon of milk, and I think that was it. It was like $32.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't tell people that groceries are down and they go buy groceries and it's more expensive. It doesn't work. You can't fool
But you're seeing
them on
all
that.
this cope from like the right wingers who are like, "Well, I'm proud to pay to support the patriotic." That's the tell.
Yeah.
Is
no,
when
you're not.
is when they switch their gears from like, "How dare Joe Biden make eggs so expensive for regular people?" to like, "I'll pay $10 for one egg if it means that we get to make America great again."
The other problem that I think is really interesting that's become a bigger issue for Trump. Remember, he came into office basically saying, I'll fix the economy and I'll deal with immigration. He's made the economy worse and people aren't buying the immigration stuff. According to new polling, a majority of Americans, 53%, disapprove of Trump's handling of immigration. Only 46 approve, a reversal from February when half the public approved of the approach. The negative views have increased across the board. In another poll this week, Americans said by a 2-to-1 margin that the Trump administration should abide by a court order to facilitate the return of a Maryland man wrongly deported to El Salvador. I thought this was interesting, too. While his rating on border security in a Fox News poll is strong, his rating on immigration is significantly worse.
Well, I think people told
They're separating
politicians that they wanted action on the border for better or for worse and for good or bad reasons.
But that didn't mean get rid of everyone.
That didn't mean like do mass deportations and disappear people in the night to foreign concentration camps with no due process.
Yeah. That's not at all what they thought. And this has been just since February that these numbers have changed. So, this is going to get worse for him. So his two major issues, he's now underwater on both of them.
And really important to know is that, according to this article in the Washington Post, his economic numbers termed dismal. They are lower than they were at any point during his last administration as well, including the COVID recession.
That's pretty rough.
This is Americans' outlook for their personal financial situation. Right now, 53% say it's getting worse, 38% say it's getting better, and 8% say it's staying the same.
And Trump's response is,
Nuh-uh, don't believe your lying eyes. Believe me, that doesn't work.
Nope. Here's a great clip, by the way, from Rachel Maddow of MSNBC summing up all of this.
What was that last result we put up from the Pew poll? Can we put up that last? Yes. Can Trump defy a Supreme Court ruling? 88% of the country says no, he cannot defy a Supreme Court ruling. Only 9% say yes, he can. And it's not the same thing, but I should mention that 9% is also 9%. 9% is also the proportion of Americans who told YouGov this week that they have a favorable view of the Black Plague. Demographic we're working with here.
So, yeah, the people who disagree and who think that Trump can disobey the Supreme Court also think the Black Plague was awesome.
9%'s not a lot, but it is 1 out of 10 people. And the fact that 1 out of 10 Americans think it's okay for the president to defy the Supreme Court is also pretty concerning.
Yes, it is. But again, the fact that these numbers are going in the tank for him hopefully suggests that there are some changes ahead. We've talked before about how we've been kind of surprised, and in a good way, with freshman Republican Congressman Jeff Bread Sandwich Hurd. He seems to be more willing than other Republican members of Colorado's delegation to speak out against House Speaker Mike Johnson and President Trump. He signed on to a letter opposing cuts to Medicaid. He's spoken out against the Trump tariffs. But now he's backtracking on his opposition to Medicaid cuts, according to the Grand Junction Daily Sentinel,
who has an unbelievably good new health and politics reporter named Jace DeCola, who we strongly recommend you reach out or you follow along with, and we will invite on the show to maybe fill the ancestral seat of one retired Charles Ashby.
Hurd apparently told the Grand Junction Sentinel that the letter he signed recently opposing Medicaid cuts doesn't mean he's against the budget blueprint, which calls for $880 billion in reductions over the next 10 years. As we've discussed at length on this show, you cannot cut $880 billion from the budget without destroying Medicaid. It doesn't work. There's no other option. I'm guessing Hurd got scolded by House leadership, and now he's kind of backtracking.
I'm not sure why he should give a shit. I mean, honestly, like the fact that he underperformed the top of the ticket in his district, and there's a great new tool from, I'll say our friends at the Down Ballot, which is a great Substack that you should follow by David Neer and some other folks that used to run the Daily Coast politics desk. They took all the congressional districts in the country and found the Trump vote and put them up there on their website. It is really, really useful, the calculations that they have to see, what Trump did in each one of these districts. And you can just go right, our YouTube viewers can see this chart, but if you go to the-downballot.com, it's right up there. And if you type COO3, there you go, Jeff Hurd. So Trump won by 9.7 in 2024. He won that district, I should say, and he won that same district by 8.3. Jeff Hurd won by less than that. So he underperformed the top of the ticket.
Yeah.
But still, that is a district, maybe the last district in the state, that really does expect some independent leadership from their people. And
that's why Boebert left.
That's right. And as we've discussed on the show before, the 3rd congressional district has the highest number of Medicaid recipients in the state.
Yep. Hurd is also not learning a very important lesson from recent Colorado history. Elected officials who gain a reputation for ignoring constituents don't tend to remain elected officials for very long. As the Durango Herald reports, Hurd has not held an in-person town hall meeting, and he says, quote, "I hope to have a town hall before long. I think we just need to make sure that it's the right time and place, and that it's going to be something that allows for a dialogue and back and forth rather than just shouting," unquote. There's no quicker way to losing your seat than ignoring your constituents. Cory Gardner learned this when he was in the U.S. Senate. Hurd will never be more at risk of losing in 2026. Usually your first re-election is the toughest. I don't understand why you don't just have a town hall, get yelled at, go home. It's better than looking like you're ducking people.
It's not that hard. Plenty of elected officials are doing it all over the country, for better or for worse. And yes, they're not good for Republicans, but you don't want to get that reputation that you're hiding, because if you do and when you do, you end up in the Cory Gardner zone.
Yep. Hurd is also playing dumb on some important issues, which I think is really strange. As the Durango Herald reports, when he was asked about his stance on the president's lack of compliance with the Supreme Court order to facilitate the return of that Maryland man mistakenly sent to El Salvador, Hurd was unwilling to take a position or even analyze the situation. As the Herald reports, quote, "I think we need to see how this process works out, what the Supreme Court does, how this process works. I'd wait and see what the facts are. I think I'm going to reserve judgment until we have a chance to see exactly how this works out," unquote. That's Hurd. Like, so we're going to wait and see if this guy dies? Or like, What do you
This
mean?
is an easy place for him to stand up and say, nope, we have a constitution that says you have to have due process. That's what should be going on here. This was botched. This was bad. Let's go through. Because as we know, the next step is sending an American citizen to one of
And
these
he's
places.
an attorney.
There you go. Like a big law firm, too.
Yeah, he should know
He
this.
ought to know better. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Gabe Evans. Evans is still ducking his constituents, which is making it easy for activists to plan events highlighting his invisibility. There's a bunch of them in the
There
next
have been
week
like
or so.
3 or 4, and maybe there's more coming up for
Yeah.
town halls in his district because he won't host one. That is sort of a blinking, flashing red light that says, dude, it's time.
Yeah. Again, much better to just get yelled at, let people get it out of their system.
They're so
but-
afraid of like the viral clip. Like the viral clip is going to be the thing that takes their asses down, not the like utter inaccessibility. And of course, this is on top of the fact that, as we've discussed on the show, Gabe Evans is closing his office to visitors because he doesn't want to hear from his constituents who are not happy with the things he's doing.
Right. And the thing that's going to be more of a problem than that is Evans' apparent commitment to cutting Medicaid. He talked about it again in a recent interview with Colorado Public Radio. We'll go through a couple of things he said here. One, he says, quote, go look at the government accounting office, not my numbers. They say $31 billion a year is how much money can be saved streamlining and cutting waste in Medicaid. Let's pretend Evans is correct, and you can save $31 billion. That's 4%
How much is that?
of
Yeah.
$880 billion.
No.
4%.
They're not going to do it.
You can't do it without getting rid of Medicaid. It's not possible.
I do love that he's quoting like numbers that just conflict right in front of his own face. I do
Right.
love that.
Right. Evans also threw Bread Sandwich under the bus on his letter about Medicaid. He said, if you look at that letter, nobody from the Energy and Commerce Committee Republicans signed on to that letter. All right.
Oh, just lawyered.
So only you on the Energy and Commerce Committee can have an opinion on Medicaid?
Again,
this guy
they're
just
all
keeps
going to
digging.
have to vote for this. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're all going to have to take this vote. It's going to be bad for all of them, as well it should be.
And let's talk about our tied for 7th or 8th favorite member of Congress.
Choo-choo.
Choo-choos are back. Congressperson Lauren Boebert is fighting a proposed Front Range rail project, and I'll make it really simple. Why? It's because white people in Castle Rock are scared of brown people.
Oh,
The Front Range Rail would offer passenger rail service from Fort Collins through Denver, south to Pueblo. A construction timeline is not available. The
which is
project's pretty
something
early.
that fucking Utah has, and we absolutely ought to have at this point. It is insane that we don't have a Front Range rail going up and down the I-25 corridor at this point.
Here's Denver 7 with the story.
A member of Colorado's congressional delegation tonight making a case for the federal government to take money away from Colorado. Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert wrote a letter to the Transportation Department and the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, asking them to reevaluate federal funding for the Front Range Rail project. In the letter, Boebert says potentially billions of dollars could go toward the project and that many people in Douglas County believe it's unnecessary and harmful to the quality of their life. She also claims the project will use eminent domain. Now, Governor Polis responded to those claims in a statement. He said, there are no federal funds planned for the construction of Front Range passenger rail, and that he's not aware of the project needing to take or use anyone else's land.
That was a solid report. Thanks, Channel 7.
Notice how Boebert doesn't elaborate on what she means when she says the project would, quote, harm our community's quality of life, unquote. Like, trains go around Castle Rock like 10 a day if you ever drive down that way.
That's right.
Those coal trains, they're everywhere.
Yep. And I'm unfamiliar with the entire network of fast tracks, but don't they get that service down there too?
They get that the bus staying, I think, skips Castle Rock for the same reason. They don't want brown
Absolutely
people
amazing
accidentally showing up in town.
Jesus Christ.
All right, let's move to the Colorado legislature. where House Republicans keep proving that they fully deserve their micro-minority status in the legislature.
I think they got upgraded from micro-minority to mini-minority.
Mini-minority?
Yeah,
Either way,
now
it's a minority.
mini-minority.
House Resolution 25-1003 was killed in the Committee on State, Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs. Colorado Springs Republican Ken Dildo DeGraff was the prime sponsor, but it was co-sponsored by every member of the House Republican caucus, though not a single Senate Republican signed on to the bill, but perhaps because they realized how dumb it was. DeGraff's legislation wanted to refer to the ballot a measure that would have placed language in the Colorado Constitution, essentially saying that parents can do whatever they want with their kids. If that doesn't seem like a problem to
Do
you...
we need a constitutional amendment for that?
Well, I guess if you want to beat your kids, you need that option.
Oh, it's about that. What's the deal? It's like beating. They want corporal punishment back. They want child labor laws repealed so they can put kids in little factories and mines.
A lot of this is pushed by homeschool organizations. The Christian Home Educators of Colorado were the only registered lobbyist working on this bill. During his testimony, DeGraff told the committee that he didn't believe children should be considered property, but then went ahead and explained why children should be considered property. Take a listen to this.
Here comes the clip with this helpful visual.
But children are, in accordance with the laws of nature, nature's God, they are considered the responsibility of parents, and that's what we see represented. So the parents have the fiduciary interest in taking care of the kids. My comparison in the sense of property, I think, is that we constitutionally, because you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Just say you in particular can't be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, but you could be deprived of custody of your child administratively, whether that be for one day or what. So the comparison is that in that sense, we treat property at a higher level than the custody of children, which should be the custody of your child. The parenting of your child should be much higher than property. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. I think we're treating the deprivation of property with a higher level of scrutiny than we are the deprivation of custody. And I think the deprivation of custody should be a much higher level. The deprivation of custody is more in lines with the deprivation of life or liberty.
Okay, so just...
What the fuck?
Didn't answer my question.
One of the many problems with this bill, which Democrats noted, was that it could impact potential child abuse cases. DeGraff likes to say big words and phrases that he finds in the thesaurus, like wraparound services to support children. Democratic Representative Gretchen Ryden asked him to elaborate on that idea, and DeGraff could not.
Thank you, Madam Chair. During your testimony, Representative Grapp, you mentioned wraparound services and seeing that is, of course, the best practice. What types of wraparound services do you feel are imperative and supportive to be kind of the intervention before families are removed or children are removed from their parents?
Representative DeGraff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's certainly not an area that I'm an expert in, but I think parenting classes would be a good example, like teaching parents the psychology of around child rearing, like maybe why the child is acting up, maybe why, or maybe it's a look at their diet. Are they hyped up on, I don't know, what's the thing, red dye number something or other? Are they do they have some sort of environmental toxin in their life that might be causing some sort of mental challenge? Could that be lead? Could that be mercury? Could that be any number
I don't
of
know.
things? So looking into that, I think could be nutrition, could be housing, could be making sure that if you get into mold, making sure that these things are looked at. And then of course you have to look at what services are available should they be available through the state? Should they be available through community involvement? What's the best way to do that? A lot of church groups will provide parenting classes. A lot of to teach parents like how to handle their kids, how to address it really depends on what the
Did someone go?
What the reason is. Is it outbursts from the children? Is it failure to thrive? They all have different solutions, I guess.
Not an expert.
No, not an expert. As we learned from then State Representative Gabe Evans in 2024, a lot of homeschool groups, including those backed by the organization Heritage Defense, have been pushing for lawmakers.
Weird name at all for a group.
Yeah. They've been pushing for lawmakers to remove restrictions on corporal punishment to protect them from investigations by social services. As one witness in support of DeGraff's bill explained, parents should, quote, get the benefit of the doubt in discussions about corporal punishment because, quote, sometimes kids lie, unquote.
Oh my God.
So that's why they wanted this.
They're
bill.
afraid that the parents are gonna take away their Pokemon cards and the kids are gonna make up a story about how their parents beat them. Is this the?
Yeah, I guess, and that's a bigger concern than parents actually beating them.
Nope.
Oy. Also in the legislature, as we talked about in our recent interview with State Senator Jessie Danielson, her childhood sex abuse bill failed again. Every Republican in the state Senate refused to vote for the measure that essentially would have put a constitutional amendment to the voters, asking them to allow future lawmakers to pass laws permitting victims of childhood sexual abuse to bring forward civil claims against their past abusers and institutions.
This would mirror a current law that would allow statutorily people to go and seek justice for crimes committed against them, against children, by lifting the statute of limitations. The reason why this has to be a constitutional amendment was explained to us by Senator Danielson, so go back a couple weeks and listen to that episode if you want the details. But she unfortunately predicted this, and I think laid the blame at the feet of the insurance lobby for not wanting to have to deal with this.
And the Catholic Archdiocese is,
of course,
also opposed for reasons you can figure out.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like supporters will pursue a citizen initiative instead now and begin gathering signatures. I imagine
Senator Danielson also told us. Yep.
I imagine this won't be hard to get.
No, and I think it's one of those things where even though it will probably pass and pass by a wide margin, there will be a depressing number of no votes. So we will have to look at which counties did not vote to allow people to seek justice against their perpetrators that abuse them as children.
That's right. And also on the legislative front, on the same day as this discussion of that childhood sex assault bill, there was also a vote and discussion on House Bill 1209, which is legislation to streamline marijuana regulation. We're not going to get into the details of that, other than as an excuse to play you this clip of Republican Senator Scott Not So Bright of Adams County, who was concerned about young people, really, really young people, using marijuana.
So, I work in the preschool world, and I see kids 3 and 4 years old coming in with copious amounts of marijuana in their backpacks.
What the fuck?
You put it there, and the parents probably did for whatever reason, and that's just not safe. I don't feel like we've achieved a general level of public safety with the regulations that exist.
For whatever reason, parents are sending their kids to preschool and kindergarten with backpacks full of marijuana.
Amounts of marijuana.
Copious amounts. He did the Elon genius fingers at the same time, which is just a fucking tell. This guy took Priola's seat?
Yeah.
Ah, jeez.
There's no way that's happening. That's so silly.
That.
And finally, on the legislative front, Colorado Springs Republican Scott There Is No Bottoms, who's also a candidate for governor, is losing his shit at the end of the session here. Here he is complaining that Democrats won't let them do anything. Essentially, Bottoms is complaining that in this democracy we have, the minority party is not allowed to do whatever they want, which
I have
sort
the
of
same complaint on
idea.
the federal level if he would like to
Right.
trade.
Right. That's kind of the idea.
Not enough
Meanwhile-
people voted for you, jackass. Like, sorry, that's just how it works.
Right. Right.
Yeah, you
In
lost.
years past, you've had a majority.
Yeah.
And that's how it worked then.
Yeah.
And here's Bottoms also whining about transgender policies and somehow comparing them to Marxism.
Oh, of course. Why not? That's about right. He's doing you got to give him credit. He's doing the viral seatbelt car video thing, which, as everything else,
At least he's not
but
driving.
host of the show, Megan tells us is like a good way to get your stuff some attention. I love that we froze on this particular frame.
Egregious things I've ever seen. Remember, LGB is a sexual preference. TQ plus is a Marxist ideology to crush and destroy. That's
Wow.
the point of it. It is a control thing. It is horrible what is happening. And I've experienced this myself. I've got video after video to prove this, that anytime I deal with transgender issues in the well of the House, which is my responsibility, I represent almost 100,000 people. And when I deal with this and I say, no, I do not accept this transgender ideology, I do not accept that things called dead naming and misgendering, those are creations of this Marxist control. I do not accept them. Just because somebody said, oh, you dead named somebody. No, you're wrong. That's craziness. Those are mental health issues that we need to deal with. And we bring them into the House and we control. This same speaker that has gabbled me down for saying those things are now trying to destroy 3 young ladies' lives that have come out and said enough is enough. Enough is enough. We must stop this stuff and reclaim Colorado.
I don't get why that makes you so angry.
Did Karl Marx write a lot about dead naming?
It was in his later works. It wasn't in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I don't think.
That was Nietzsche.
Not that either. I don't know. Like, there's no fucking way that he knows what Marxism is.
No, but it's like, it's the boogeyman. It's what they do. He doesn't know about what makes people trans either, apparently, or how they are trans, or what that experience is like, because he's said a bunch of bullshit there that indicates it's quite the opposite.
A dick.
This guy
All
will
right.
never be governor. Lucky for us.
No. Let's do a couple of quick hits and then we'll get out of here this week. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, he's got to be fired, right?
Or demanded of resignation and then kicked out, and he's got to go. I don't really care what the mechanism is.
His latest blunder, apparently he had an unsecure internet connection installed in his office so that he could use the Signal app, the same app he used to text war plans to a bunch of officials, including accidentally a reporter from The Atlantic.
Editor of The Atlantic.
Editor of The Atlantic, right. He had also texted war plans to his wife and his brother-in-law.
Like,
why?
Look how
Why
cool
would
this
you do
is. Look, I'm doing wars, guys. I'm doing wars.
I'm making war. Look at me.
He had, let me get this straight. I actually don't think I follow this story as closely as you have. He had a special unsecure line installed in the Pentagon so he could use an app that wasn't sufficient to protect classified information and share it with his family.
Yep.
And these are the guys who lost their fucking shit, and we probably lost an election because of a fucking email server?
Yeah.
From someone who wasn't president?
Yeah.
God damn it.
Hegseth is losing a lot of staff, including recently his chief of staff. He's got a habit, apparently, of berating staffers and even top generals at the Pentagon. President Trump says he supports Hegseth, but that vote of confidence often ends with a pink slip, so
I mean, this
hopefully
isn't
that
just like
happens.
humiliating and politically damaging. This is like actually fucking dangerous. Like, God forbid we end up in some kind of military conflict that we weren't in before these idiots took over. They're hurling us towards a very, very precarious situation. I mean, Russia is absolutely seeing every single thing these guys are texting to each other, right? There's no doubt in anyone's
Well, they are
mind.
now.
But like what, like think about like Canada and like the other countries that share intelligence with us. Like, they're gonna just stop, right? There's no reason for them to continue intelligence sharing agreements with us if we can't, like, I can't believe they actually installed the fucking like, what was it, like Verizon DSL, like into the Pentagon, so he can use his favorite little chat app.
We're not far away from him demanding that they put a can and a string in.
That's like a bullhorn. Smoke signals. No one can see these.
Tell your wife at home if you're going to do that, huh? Just
unreal
wait.
Stuff.
All right, let's go to our fuck around and find out of the week. The state of Arkansas is asking for federal assistance after 14 tornadoes struck the state over a 2-day period in March. Arkansas Governor Sarah Don't Call Me Huckabee Sanders, who was Trump's communication director in his first term, has had no luck getting Trump to send help. He wants to get rid of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and force states to pay for their own disaster response efforts. That includes Arkansas, where 64% of the state's voters supported Trump in 2024. 2 other Trump states, Missouri and Mississippi, are still waiting to hear if they will receive disaster relief help from the federal government after recent storm damage there. They're not going to get it.
I just want to say, do we think for a second there's any universe in which Kamala Harris, as president of the United States, would have done anything but immediately send as much aid as humanly possible to any of these states, regardless of the fact they voted for the other guy by a whopping margin?
No, not a chance. This would not have even been an issue.
Nope. This is fucking insane.
Speaking of insane, South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace really wants the title of craziest person in Congress. She posted this interaction with a constituent at an Ulta beauty store in South Carolina.
Just the setup is too much, man. It's too...
Remember, she posted this herself.
As a member of Congress.
I do them every year. You want to keep going? Do you want to keep going and keep harassing me? You could have gone to a dozen town halls last year.
I asked if you're doing any more this year. It was one simple question.
Yeah.
Are you doing this?
I've already done one. I'll do plenty more.
This year was a simple question.
You're always invited.
Okay, sweet. Well,
and by the way, I voted for gay marriage twice.
What does that have to do
so
with
I'm just saying, it has everything to do with you.
You think everything about me has to do with gay marriage?
I do,
That's
absolutely.
Your first stance when you speak with me?
Absolutely.
No humane
if you want to get in my face about town halls, you should have shown up to one last year.
Thing you can talk about me just saying, "Oh, I support gay marriage."
Yeah,
that's
because you're getting in my face about a town hall. You could have gone last year. Would you like me?
If you have any plans to have more town halls this year?
I have town halls every year. I have over a dozen every year.
Great, that was my entire question. You didn't have to go into this spiel.
You could have come to any of them last year. I had over a dozen. Where were you the year before that? Or the year before that?
It was a simple
oh,
question.
because you know what? Because you people on the left are crazy.
So
you're absolutely fucking crazy.
I'm absolutely fucking crazy.
You are. And get out of my face. Goodbye. Fuck you.
What are you doing? What? Why would you just whip out your phone? I don't understand.
She recorded herself just saying "fuck you" to a constituent in a cosmetics store,
and then posted it. Said, "Look at me."
This would have been really bad for her if someone else had put it on the internet.
Right.
She's losing it.
Well, she's lost it.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's crazy. The MyPillow guy, Mike Lindell, and his attorneys are in trouble for using artificial intelligence to file legal briefings. This is crazy. You might remember Lindell from his close association with former Mesa County clerk and recorder Tina Peters, who is in jail now because of multiple felonies related to breaking into her own election system in order to prove the big lie from the 2020 election. Lindell has some new legal troubles, and he's handling these charges in a very strange way. Here's Kyle Clark with 9 News.
Attorneys in Colorado and elsewhere are on notice. If they use AI to prepare their court filings, they got to check to make sure the artificial intelligence didn't just make up laws or court cases. You're never going to believe this, but lawyers for election denier and MyPillow guy Mike Lindell are now accused of using AI to submit a court filing that was so full of make-believe nonsense that a federal judge in Colorado is threatening to refer them for discipline.
Lindell got served at an election deniers rally in Denver.
This.
It was a lawsuit saying the rigged election claims from the MyPillow guy were a sham, and that those lies did real damage to Denver-based Dominion voting systems
and an employee singled out for harassment. Now it's Lindell's attorneys accused of making stuff up.
These are very, very serious rule violations if those allegations prove to be true.
A federal judge says Lindell's attorneys turned in a brief with nearly 30 defective citations. They admitted it was AI. Jane Cox specializes in legal ethics at the firm Burns, Feiga & Will.
Including completely fictitious sites is really egregious.
U.S. District Court Judge Nina Wong agrees. She's threatening to refer Lindell's attorneys for discipline, like the loss of their license. Christopher Kachoroff represents election deniers across America. He's had some other embarrassing briefs, like the one seen when he showed up pantsless to a court hearing on Zoom.
And it's not so much that they use generative AI, it's just they didn't check it.
Charles Luce is an expert on legal ethics and technology at Benamor.
If you don't know how to drive a car, don't drive a car. If you don't know how to use generative AI thoughtfully and intelligently, don't do it, or at least hire people who know how to.
Lindell's attorneys declined to explain all those errors to the judge until she straight up asked him if it was AI, catching them, you might say, with their pants down.
Another embarrassing brief will go down as like an absolutely perfect
solid writing.
Way to go.
If you're going to use AI for your court briefings, why bother hiring an attorney at all? Right? I mean,
I have no answer. This whole thing is fucking insane. We live in hell.
It's so weird. Maybe this is the only attorney he can afford. They're outsourcing.
Oh, we're on
AI.
the Lindell case. Well, what's he paid us? Well, he's bankrupt. All right, turn the robot onto it. It'll come up with something.
He's paying us in pillows.
God.
And finally, our gibberish of the week. Here's Louisiana Republican Senator John Kennedy on Fox News trying to explain why AOC Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would be a bad Democratic candidate for president.
In terms of the Congresswoman, look, I encourage her to run. I hope she does run. I understand. I listened to her speech. I understand her slogan is going to be change begins with a mustard seed, which I think is interesting. I guess if Governor Pritzker runs, his slogan will be you can have a tummy and still be yummy. I don't know. I just think with the Congresswoman, if you scratch the surface, you get more surface. I don't think she has the intellectual firepower to run a campaign to be president, but I hope she does.
What the fuck is wrong with this guy?
You scratch the surface, you get more surface? And then he says she doesn't have the intellectual
I like that if you have a tummy, you can still be yummy. I'm going to take that one. That's good.
These people, they just, when you think they just don't know what they're talking about, they go on TV and they prove it.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
All right, that's it for us this week.
The Get More Smarter podcast is a production of ColoradoPolls.com and the Big Horn Company. Your hosts are me, Ian Silverian, America's dad,
Jason Bain,
who managed to figure out how to engineer and produce this thing. I make the video version sometimes, and sometimes Megan makes the video version, but she's been doing a lot more lately, and thanks for that. She does a lot of other stuff, too. The phenomenal Breakmaster Cylinder made our theme song. Get your shots while you still can. Protect your trans kids, your autistic kids, your immigrant kids, and any other kids in your life. Really. If you send us a message, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or a comment on Spotify, reply to a post on Blue Sky, or you leave a nasty comment on YouTube, we might read it on the air. Don't you want to be famous? Subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Rate the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you got more smarter. This week's review comes from some shithead on YouTube who says, Dumb and Dumber, thanks for your awesome contribution to the dialogue. Find us at GetMoreSmarter.com where you can sign up for bonus content in our Substack, and please send all angry and non-angry rants to angryrants at GetMoreSmarter.com, other stuff to Ian at GetMoreSmarter.com, and other stuff to Jason at GetMoreSmarter.com. Thank you so much to State Rep of the Pod, Rebekah Stewart, for being our guest this week, and thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Am I dumb and you're dumber, or am I dumber and you're dumber?
No way to tell.
Yeah, it really is hard. Get more dumberer.
Get more dumberer. That would have been at least try. Like at
Right.
least try. Like,
That would have been funny.
Throw
Somebody
a fucking punch, man.
Yeah.
Somebody else be mean to us on the internet and
be mean
take
to
a
us in a
second to
clever
think
way,
about
please.
it. Right. Just throw your back into it a little tiny
Make an
bit.
effort.
Get started for $59.99 a month for 12 months. Plus, ask how to get a $500 prepaid card on a qualifying gig package. Call today.